Senator Grace Poe. Sometime third quarter of 2024, J.Y. De La Rosa, a staff of Senator Grace Poe, requested Sec Bonoan through me if Senator Grace Poe can be accommodated in the DPWH NEP. Sec Bonoan told me there is a 500 million for Senator Grace Poe and instructed me to ask the Senator for a list of projects. J.Y. De La Rosa told me to coordinate the matter with Mrs. Patron, a contractor. Mrs. Patron told me to prepare the list. Upon my instructions, Engineer Gerard Apollesia submitted a consolidated list of the following projects, 1 in Laguna and 3 in NCR. These projects are indicated in the list here to attach as Annex M. Thereafter, the list of projects was included in the NEP by Sec Bonoan through Usec Cati Cabral. Later on, the said projects appeared in the GAA for 2025. There was a 20% commitment collected for Senator Grace Poe. Mrs. Patron, a contractor, collected the commitment for Sen. Grace Poe at Diamond Hotel from one of my aides. Congresswoman Mary Mitzi Mitz Kahayon Uy. There were projects released in Congresswoman Kahayon Uy's congressional district, which I facilitated. I submitted projects being proposed by her to proponents for funding, the details of which I am still verifying and confirming at the moment. Congressman Florida Robes. There were also projects released in Congresswoman Florida Robes' congressional district, which I facilitated. I submitted projects being proposed by her to proponents for funding, the details of which I'm still verifying and confirming at the moment. Congressman Zaldico. In addition to my statements in my affidavit dated 25 of September 2025, I was told by Engineer Alcantara, Congressman Zaldi would from time to time deal also with Engineers Gerard Pacanan, Gerard Apollesia, and Danny Villa. There were times Engineer Gerard Pacanan and Gerard Apollesia would give me certain amounts, supposedly from Congressman Zaldico. Usec Tri-Give Olivar of DepEd. In addition to my statements in my affidavit dated 25 of September 2025, I wish to add that I have known Usec Tri-Give as early as 2010 when he was still a staff of Senator Bong Revilla. He is a common figure in budget deliberation hearings and by reason of which I had interacted with him on multiple occasions. Usec Tri-Give then worked under the office of Senator Edgardo Angara and then later worked under the office of Senator Sani Angara. When Senator Sani Angara became a chairman of finance, Usec Tri-Give and I would have several interactions as part of our work in budget preparations. When Senator Revilla was incarcerated with Senator Jinggoy Estrada, Usec Tri-Give and I would frequently call each other so we can help look after the welfare of concerns of Senator Revilla, whom I visited several times with Senator Jinggoy Estrada while they were in detention. Aside from the details I had earlier mentioned in my affidavit dated 25 of September 2025, Usec Tri-Give and I also had transactions concerning Senator Angara between 2019 and 2024, where Usec Tri-Give received deliveries representing 12% of the projects of Senator Sani Angara, while the latter was chairman of finance. As I previously mentioned in my affidavit dated 25 of September 2025, Usec Olivar and I discussed the unprogrammed appropriations supposedly for the Office of the Executive Secretary. Thereafter, DPWH received a special allotment release order, which included projects worth 2.85 billion. The contract IDs for the projects worth 2.85 billion covered by the said SARO can be secured from the records of DPWH Regional Office for Region 3 and the 1st District Engineering Office of Bulacan. Moreover, in the unprogrammed allocation, for 2025, there could have been an additional 12 billion more or less funding, which I am verifying and confirming at the moment. DPWH Secretary Mark Villar and Usec Cabral. I was appointed Assistant Secretary of DPWH by former President Rodrigo Duterte in 2016 during the term of DPWH Secretary Mark Villar. As Assistant Secretary for Operations, I was assigned over the Visayas regions. While I was Assistant Secretary for Operations, I was introduced to Carlo Aguilar, a cousin of Sec Mark Villar. Usec Cabral was already the Undersecretary for Planning Service when I became Assistant Secretary. As Undersecretary for Planning Service, Usec Cabral was working closely with Sec Mark Villar for the allocation, listing, and budgeting of all the DPWH infrastructure projects. While I was Assistant Secretary, I was also later designated as Chairman of the Central Bids and Awards Committee, Central BAC. In the later part of 2017, I was promoted to Undersecretary of the DPWH during the incumbency of Senator Mark Villar and took my oath of office as Undersecretary before him. In the first quarter of 2018, I was designated as Undersecretary for Operations for NCR, 4B, and the 3 Visayas regions. Upon my request, I was replaced as Chairman Central BAC sometime in February 2020 because of political intrigues, as I was reportedly siding with then City of Manila Mayor Isko Moreno, who was vocal against then President Rodrigo Duterte. All of this time, the funding of all projects was cleared through Usec Cabral for approval by Sec Mark Villar. From time to time, Usec Cabral would ask me to submit detailed list of projects with regards to lump sum fund allocations of DPWH, which list she sometimes would approve herself or forward to Sec Mark Villar for approval. Among others, this included EDSA and other major roads, project allocations, maintenance of creeks and waterways, etc. The commission for these approved projects was 10% and divided as follows: 50% to Carlo Aguilar, presumably for Sec Mark Villar, 25% Usec Cabral, 25% for myself. Undersecretary Maria Catalina E. Cabral. As a general rule, with very little exceptions, it is Usec Maria Catalina Cabral, with the imprimatur of Secretary Mark Villar, and later continued by Sec Manny Bonoan, who had control at the DPWH level to remove, include, add, deduct, or modify insertions of items in the NEP for infrastructure or those pertaining to DPWH. Usec Cabral would tell me that she would communicate and meet legislators to inform them of the amount of their allocations and ask them for titles of projects that they want to include in the DPWH budget. In a matrix of process flow that I have prepared, which I am attaching here to as Annex N, Usec Cabral has total influence and authority in preparing and finalizing the NEP for infrastructure. On multiple occasions, I personally delivered and also caused to be delivered cash to Usec Cabral at her house at Tatalon, Quezon City, and other places. DPWH Secretary Manuel Bonoan. DPWH Secretary Manuel Bonoan is a long-time DPWH official who has held top positions through different administrations. I look up to Sec Bonoan and consider him as a mentor. I treasure his guidance and friendship over the years. Prior to Sec Bonoan's assumption as Secretary of DPWH, I was the Undersecretary for Operations and Planning for NCR, Visayas, having assumed the said position in 2018. Unlike during the time of Sec Mark Villar, when I was not given much task, even removed as BAC chairman, and had very limited operational functions during the COVID pandemic period, Sec Bonoan entrusted me with more operational functions and let me work more closely with Usec Cabral. Sometime in 2022, Sec Bonoan directed me to submit a list of projects for possible inclusion in the NEP for fiscal year 2023 worth around 450 million. Without question and delay, I asked Bulacan First DEO for a list of projects for funding. Thereafter, Engineer Alcantara submitted to me a list of projects for funding under the NEP. Those projects are indicated in the list here to attach as Annex O. In compliance with this order, I forwarded the list to Sec Bonoan. He told me that Undersecretary for Planning Maria Catalina Cati Cabral shall facilitate and ensure the inclusion of these projects in the NEP. Engineer Alcantara gave the 10% of the value of the projects. Similarly, in 2023, Sec Bonoan directed me to submit a list of projects for possible inclusion in the NEP for fiscal year 2024 worth around 150 million. Again, without question and delay, I asked Bulacan First DEO for a list of projects for funding. Thereafter, Engineer Alcantara submitted to me a list of projects for funding under the NEP. Those projects are indicated in the list here to attach as Annex P. In compliance with this order, I forwarded the list to Sec Bonoan. In compliance with this order, I forwarded the list to Sec Bonoan. Sec Bonoan said that Usec Cabral shall again facilitate and ensure the inclusion of these projects in the NEP. Engineer Alcantara gave 15% of the value of the projects. Also in the year 2024, Sec Bonoan also directed me to submit a list of projects for possible inclusion in the NEP for fiscal year 2025 for the amount of 900 million. I asked Bulacan First DEO for a list of projects for funding. Thereafter, Engineer Alcantara submitted to me a list of projects for funding under the NEP. Those projects are indicated in the list here to attach as Annex Q. In compliance with this order, I forwarded the list to Sec Bonoan. Sec Bonoan said that Usec Cabral shall again facilitate and ensure the inclusion of these projects in the NEP. Engineer Alcantara gave 20% of the value of the projects. With respect to the commitments collected by Engineer Alcantara narrated above, Secretary Bonoan and I received a percentage. In many instances, during budget deliberations, I was tasked by Sec Bonoan to talk to legislators over their funding and other concerns, and to forward these concerns to Usec Cabral for action and resolution. Sec Bonoan and Usec Cabral. Every year, including years 2023, 2024, and 2025, Usec Cati Cabral apportions the budget ceiling for the DPWH's allocable NEP among the districts according to the endorsed programs, activities, and projects, PAPs. Although she would make it appear that 100% allocable NEP had been apportioned, Usec Cati Cabral would reserve a substantial percentage of that allocable NEP for her and Sec Bonoan's preferred projects. Sec Manny Bonoan would from time to time ask me to take charge of part of his own reserve allocations. The value of the projects that I handled for Sec Bonoan was at least 5 billion per annum for the years 2023, 2024, and 2025, with an average of 15% commitment. Of this 15% average commitment, Sec Bonoan, 75% usually would give. Of this 15% average commitment, Sec Bonoan, 75%, usually would give me 25% of the commitment, with the rest of the commitment shared between him and Usec Cati Cabral. Usec Cati Cabral herself took charge of her own reserve allocations. Once again, I humbly reserve the right to submit another supplementary affidavit if warranted in the premises. I attest to the truth of the foregoing statements based on my personal knowledge and authentic records. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you.